You can, you can probably hear me. I don't even have to type. That's the whole point here. Can you hear me? Can someone tell me whether you can hear me? I'm working with these AirPods for the first time. All right. Thank you, Shiloh. Can you hear me? Good, good, good. Excellent, excellent. Well, heck, we can start. Um, Good. All ears. That's what we are. Welcome, my fellow curiosities. We are a curiosity. Look at that. A/V times 5.5. I don't know what that is. Hello, Jeff. Nice to see you all here. Yes, what a delight. What a delight. I've been doing this work for about 30 years now, and the audience has been relatively small. So I'm just delighted that there are people who are interested in engaging with this stuff as I am. And we're just here to wonder together. And Mick is here. Hello, and Yoish. Mick Dodge. I'm a fan of him, and he's a fan of me. He's a fellow furry guy like me. Um, I was once as furry as Mick Dodge. I've cut it back, but I lived on the world's largest hippie commune for 7 years, and the rule there was that you never cut any of your hair, even the women, which meant that, for example, when I met my wife, she had a little bit of hair, not just where it normally grows. She had the kind of hair Alzheimer's that we all deal with in old age. She had just a little tough. It was no big deal. But anyway, I was like uh, Mick in that I was hirsute. Mick was the star of a National Geographic reality TV show for 2 years. And so he ends up dealing with a fair number. It had appeal to survivalists. And so he ends up doing a lot of engagement with MAGA people who mistake him for that kind of guy. He's not. He's got deep military training, grew up on Sun Tzu's Art of War with a military professional as a father. So he understands the importance of verbal combat. Which is, in a way, my big argument here is you need that in your repertoire. It's a bulwark against physical combat. You need to be tough enough to be able to handle that. I wrote this morning something about it that nice folks don't finish last, but folks who think that niceness solves everything do, or else they pretend they're nice when they're not. There are lots of ways to do that. I notice that there are a bunch of very popular words that go ill-defined. They're what I call loaded, load-bearing, loose last words. Uh, what your says? Oh, okay. So these are words like nice, kind, empathic, tolerant, the golden rule. And if you were to actually find a operational, a practical definition for them, they all mean accommodate. And obviously the answer isn't to always accommodate everything. Nice folks stay alive. Nice folks stay alive if they also have the capacity to tease. And that's how I feel about it. You've got to be able to tease other people and tease yourself. My goal for society is not that we all show each other circumspect respect, but that we get to where we can laugh at and with each other. So, I mean, the way to this man's heart is to tease me. Because I know that everybody recognizes that what I say is just my opinion, but I have to demonstrate that I recognize that it's just my opinion, and that opinions are what we're dealing with, and no one gets to lord authority over anyone else about what's right in the world. Obviously, supervisors get to tell underlings what to do. They don't get to talk as though they have solved reality. So a lot of what my work is about is getting us to where we can tease each other and and even viciously. I don't know if you've seen my most recent video. I put it out on Friday evening. I'm playing with the edges of vulgarity there, and I'm trying to figure out how to add that to our repertoire because we're dealing with a hyper vulgar movement. Hyper. I mean, they show no bounds. They are shameless about their shamelessness, about their shamelessness. And if we don't get thuggish back, we end up in the situation we've been in, which is that we're trying to tolerate their intolerance, and it's not working. We give an inch, they take a mile. I have very close friends. Given my history, I have close friends who argue that we need to show respect to the MAGA people and that they'll come around. I have lots of people in my circle who say there's no talking with them. There's no talking with them. And I'm saying, yeah, you need something else in your repertoire. It's not about talking with them. It's about disappointing their indulgences. So that's that's the spirit with which I make that experimental video that I just put out on Friday. All right, let me see what the questions are, or the comments, or the critique. By all means, kick the tires on this stuff. Yes, I am talking about John Etak a little bit. He's someone I go rounds with. I'm about to do another interview with him tomorrow at 9 in the morning. He'll put it out a little later than that. And my sense is that he's still driven more by morality than strategy, for my taste, by my standards. That is, he can go into a reverie about how he sees the world, and I'm trying to up level out of that because I don't see the whole world. I don't see the whole picture, and talk about how we do what the philosopher Hume called uh, truth emergent from disagreements among friends. I love the boy. We have a great time. We yuck it up with each other. He teases me, I tease him back. But it's but I do want to. We do. For the video tomorrow, I said, how about if we corner ourselves with this question? You think that in the situations where you've worked, he's a very successful uh, deprogrammer, is what they called him back in the day, of Scientologists. Well, and that's a certain kind of situation. Um, and the Trumpists are not necessarily the same. So I do not assume that what worked in one situation will work in all situations. And I think that MAGA is different. Okay, have I read Ian McGilchrist's book? I started it, and I had a nice long conversation with him once. And I don't end up supporting his approach. Because it's the same thing. It's because I think he's got a moral agenda underneath it that doesn't look at the dilemma. He wants to say that soft and fluid is somehow superior. He said this in conversation, that left brain is somehow superior to right brain. I'm not as convinced of that. I work very closely with a neuroscientist. I am not a neuroscientist by any stretch, but I've worked for 30 years with a Harvard Berkeley neuroscientist who says, yeah, that stuff about left-right brain distinction doesn't understand how brains work. It suffers a fundamental problem that's a problem across all the sciences, which is we tend to think of objects as having properties. So left brain is somehow artistic and right brain is not. It's way more complicated than that. And we're trying to figure out how the complications yield us what we call mind from brain. So this association of biological or physical parts with their properties is, from my perspective, a real problem. I'm trying to understand dynamic form, that is ever-changing form. Here's an example of how that works. We like to compare minds to computers, but there are in computers, when a part is not being used, it's dormant. That is not the state of the mind. The mind is gazillions of nerves and nerve endings interacting with each other, and they are all on hair trigger. So actually, when we are not thinking, the whole thing is still sparking in all sorts of directions. So you have to understand the dynamic forms that emerge, almost like whirlpools, in minds that enable us to do the kind of thinking we do. It's not that a property or a word is in a module. They talk about as modularity in neuroscience. Okay, let me see. I'm sorry, I have to stop long enough to read these things. Saw the intervention vid. My number one thought was, how do you prevent a person from going ballistic and assaulting you or worse when challenging them so strongly? Amen, Tim. Amen. And I'm not dealing effectively with that when I am making videos where I script both parts. That's why I call this last video imaginary, or it's imagined. I think we're doing a lot of what I would call scornography when we're watching YouTube videos about MAGA. All of these videos that have the thumbnails that say, we whooped their asses, and then you watch the video and no, we actually didn't, because they're actually playing a different game than we are. And yes, they will end up being challenged, being volatile. Now, here's what I have found for most conversation. I'm not saying that that would work, Tim, with the kind of person I was pretending to be in that video, but it works incredibly well with people who are a tad more civil. And it relates to what I said just a minute earlier, which is there is no lubricant I have found for saying blunt things like being honestly heartfelt, self-effacing. That is, if you be ironic about your own opinion and don't come on like you're on your high horse, if you can tease and take teases and deliver teases to yourself, it really does lubricate things. We see it actually, it's funny, we see it in sitcoms. In sitcoms, you got these characters who are extremely blunt, but we're laughing at them while they're being blunt. So we get both sides of it. We recognize what content there is in their message, but we also see them as kind of goofballs. A Jughead or a Kramer maybe would be an example of those kinds of people. It's a big question. I'm struggling to get across in this series I'm doing on irony as your superpower, which, by the way, is ironic because no, we don't have superpowers. But uh, there are things to take very seriously. There are things to be laughing at. I call it dirony, dire irony. It's not just humor. It's that life is a white knuckle ride, slapstick comedy, tragic comedy. And so how do you convey that, and how do you deal with an issue I deal with all the time? Some people would argue it's a reason not to be ironic, is that someone will give me an answer and I'll give them someone will say something to me and I'll give them a serious response to it, and then they say that they were just kidding. And sometimes I believe them. I mean, obviously, Trump says he's just kidding. It's basically a no tags back move by an asshole. But there are also people who take something seriously. We are all hypersensitive. We are all hyper insensitive too. Hyper, probably not. We are all sensitive and insensitive. And so figuring out, for me, it's always this question, figuring out how to deal with confirmation bias. There are some things I can't afford to hear. Not now, not today, not in the moment. I'll tend to speed read hate mail anyway. But what I'm saying here is that there is that tension to deal with. And I find the people who are easiest to deal with are people who recognize that it's a tension we're all dealing with. I had to figure out what we mean by PC and anti-PC. And I think what we mean is theatrical or rhetorical sensitivity and hypersensitivity. Both moves, sensitivity, back off, I'm sensitive, or make room for me, you're too sensitive. Both of those are space-taking or power-gaining moves. And they have their place. Life is a power struggle. Not always, obviously. I mean, there's plenty of win-win and harmony and all of that, but there is going to be competition. And if there's going to be competition, that means you have to figure out what space is yours to take, what space isn't yours to take, all of that. I think of it as like dancing on a crowded dance floor. And what do you do when someone is just flailing too wildly? So for that, the people I get along with best recognize that we're all dealing with that issue, and they don't take fake umbrage or pretend that you're sensitive and they're not. And that's some of what I'm trying to get at in that last video. And I wrote a comment to one guy who wrote back, one Trump troll kind of guy, that a comment in the comment section that was another experiment in how to do this. I carved him a new asshole. I mean, I pulled out all the stops and gave him a hard time from a cheerful place. And we'll see what works. Obsessive Audio says gray rock works for me when no contact isn't. I think you might mean when no contact is possible, and that's my issue. I love the statement often misattributed to George Bernard Shaw, never fight with a pig, you'll just get dirty and the pig likes it. My counter argument, because often what I'll do is I'll take an answer as a springboard to the next question, is no, you can't say never fight with a pig. In fact, the statement itself is fighting with the pig. It's calling him a pig, right? Never fight with pigs. No, you can't do that. Look where it's gotten us to not fight with MAGA. You know, if you're dealing with people who will take a mile every time you you give an inch, walking away can work, but it can also enable them to take way more miles, as MAGA has done. Let's see. It's a Sherman stream. You guys know I have to put up with this shit all the time. I live with me. I happen to like it very much. I'm having a lot of fun in my head. I mean, my favorite debating partner remains me. I have great debating partners, but we do a whole lot of that. So anyway, yes, I got to say over and over, because it's not getting across. There are situations in which to accommodate. There are situations in which to leave. There are situations in which to fight. All three of those moves can work beautifully or backfire horribly. So I'm just trying to expand the repertoire, because the people I know in this recently cushy country where civility was high, especially in my neighborhood, shit, I live in Berkeley, you know, is it's ended up cultivating a civilized temperament, and as a result, we are not prepared for the kind of verbal combat we need in order to survive. And not only that, this is a conservative perspective. The founder of conservatism is Edmund Burke, and he makes exactly this point, is that if a society gets too civilized, it's ill-prepared to deal with conflict. Our capacity for dealing with conflict just atrophies. So people look at me and they say, yeah, no, he's out of line. This is not appropriate behavior for a civilized society. Damn straight, not for a civilized society. I don't talk like that. I mean, you may not know it. I can be a really civilized guy. I know how to play that one. I know how to lead. I know how to take psychic distance. I know how to humor. I'm not saying I do it great. One of the big challenges is figuring out when to do which. That's my point. And in general, the point is figuring out when to do what is the heart of wisdom. That's what it is. The wisdom to notice the differences that make a difference to what you should do in different situations. So I tend to see MAGA as just the most recent manifestation of people who have either indulged in externalizing all doubt. You know, if there's anything to doubt, it's you. If anyone should doubt, it's you. Or it's too much discomfort in their bodies and they don't want to deal with the core questions. I'm a conservative progressor. I think we all are. We're all trying to figure out what to conserve and what to change, obviously. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, where to draw a line, where not to draw a line. All of that stuff is just fundamental to life. I picked up this hand signal from a girlfriend early on. I was in my 30s, late 30s, and she complained about how I did this. And this too, you know, that is, I'll keep some to myself and I'll give you some. The give and take. And I realized at some point, yeah, that's what we all do. That's what life is. We've got this fundamental issue. I mean, this is why all my work is grounded in this biological approach. An organism has to be selectively interactive with its environment. It can't take in everything, and it can't give out everything. It has to figure out what to take in and what to give out. I don't mean figure out. I mean, they have, from the origins, there's no learning and there's no trying to adapt, you could say, at the origins of life. Trying to adapt starts with learning, with nerve endings and all of that. I mean, that's a little simplified, but that's kind of what I mean by it. But an adaptation is a capacity to fundamentally, it's got to be a capacity to figure out what to take in and what to keep out. We are what we call far from equilibrium systems. That is, we need to take in energy to remain ourselves. But energy tends to degenerate things. Hurricanes don't organize stuff; they disorganize stuff. So then, figuring out what to take in and what to leave out is fundamental to life. And for humans with feelings and thoughts, it's confirmation bias. And so, yeah, you might have heard this before. From my perspective, decent folks recognize that confirmation bias is a problem for them that they have to manage, and assholes treat confirmation bias as a solution to all their problems. Okay, thank you. You're welcome, Tim. Let me see what I got here. I might have missed something up top here. Um, let's see. By the way, if I don't get to a question you want to deal with, email me. I'm at my initials at my name, js@jeremysherman.com. And let's see. Okay, here we go. So I'm looking through here. But that I ruin friendships over this kind of thing. Do I just expect how far to go? Yes. So this is to Los Skills. Yeah, it's experimenting, and not only that, you've been doing it lifelong. You have been experimenting all life long. Just take that as the fundamental curriculum of life, is figuring out how far to go. I've said it before. Let's see. Uh, I have a phrase for this. It goes without saying, but bears repeating. That's my saying for it. Which is, my equanimity comes from being equally anxious that I am too assertive or not assertive enough for a situation. That's one example of that. It's this thing again. You know, we talk about setting boundaries. We don't talk about, okay, well, how do you set them given that everybody else is setting them too? And sometimes someone's boundary is someplace else from where yours is in a conflict. There's a skirmish on the edge of the boundaries. Okay. So, yes, my perspective is you've got to experiment with how far to go. I have lost friends I wish I hadn't by being too blunt. I have stuck with friendships too long by not being blunt enough. Uh, I lost a book contract by being too blunt with the publisher one time. I kind of regret it, but it also was learning. It's not a book I had to write. Um, but anyway, yes, experiment, trial and error, and recognize that that's what you're doing. Uh, I really love the Serenity Prayer, not the God part, but everything else about it is a beautiful template for all sorts of tough judgment calls that life deals with. If you look up variations on the Serenity Prayer on Google, you'll find 16 Serenity Prayer variations that I wrote that are just dealing with life's basic tough judgment calls. I wrote this quite a while ago, but I think it still holds. Interesting question for me is, what is wisdom? And it's been up for me in the last couple of days. It's funny. I ramble. I always have to pay attention to how much I ramble. And yet that's what this format is. So bear with me if you're here, and leave if you're not. But anyway, what is wisdom has been a really interesting question for me. And and I think it's actually a word like living being. It's a do be is what I call it, because it's both a verb and a noun. So to stay alive, I have to keep hustling. As I've mentioned many times before, uh, you will generate 330 billion new cells today. You are doing in order to remain being. Well, I think of wisdom that way too. It's a noun, uh, but really, when you look at the Serenity Prayer, it's the prayer part. It's wanting to know the differences that make a difference. And just yesterday, I was driving back from a gig. I played a gig, and I was thinking about this, and I was saying, "Okay, wait a second. The accumulated wisdom to know the difference is what we call knowledge." So I was thinking, okay, well, wait, what are you doing, Jeremy, here? Because maybe that's knowledge, and wisdom is just the quest. No, I actually think that wisdom is probably both verb and noun, and knowledge is the accumulation. That the words, I mean, if I were to sort them out, I'm not talking about what they mean to the world. I'm often what will happen with words. for me is that I will be trying to come up with a more precise definition for them, regardless of what they mean in the outside world. For example, I've turned empathy, compassion, sympathy, and charity into four distinct categories, even though it's a total smear when you go out into the real world and talk to people about those things. They're all over the map. But for me, empathy is putting myself in someone else's shoes. Compassion is remembering when they were my shoes. I have a particular moment I keep in mind when I'm trying to remember when my behavior was like Stalin's. I mean, we all got the same human repertoire. We apply it in different degrees. Now, I want to be pan empathic and pan compassionate. I want to be able to look at anybody's behavior in the whole wide world and put myself in their shoes and remember when they were, to some degree or another, my shoes, like I did with Stalin with this one instance. It was a time I was teaching an 80-person psych class, and I had someone in the class who was acting up fiercely, and I had a big audience at the time. That was a big audience, and I felt like shutting him down. I thought, oh, Stalin. There he is. There he is. If I want to be able to do that with anybody, I cannot afford for it to automatically translate into sympathy and charity. Sympathy is the motivation to accommodate them. Charity is accommodating them. I need a clutch pedal in there, or else I can't afford to be empathic with everybody. So I need a way to be able to put myself in their shoes, understand where they're coming from. I can do that with MAGA people. I could make MAGA's case for itself better than they can. Not as parody. I really could make their case. I think it's total horseshit. But I also could make their case. I could do the same. The extreme version of that I keep in mind is I'd like to be able to sit down with Hitler, make his case for him to where he says, "Damn, Jeremy, you said that better than I did," and slit his throat in cold blood. That's how much of a clutch pedal I'd need to pull that one off. All right, let's see. Where are we? I don't know if I got to the question. We'll see. What I was going to say was, if I somehow don't get to a question here or something comes up, just write to me, js@jeremysherman.com. We can talk. I'm around. This is what I do all day long. It's an incredibly lucky life that I get to just do this and have been doing it for 30 fucking years. I get up at 7 o'clock. Most mornings I'm at my desk by 7. I'm done by 7 in the evening. It ain't work. It's work and play. It's work for which I have infinite patience and delight. And this is an incredibly lucky life, not only to have the freedom to do that, but also the appetite to do that. That's dumb luck, but I'm grateful for it. And I feel like I just have to use it as best I can. So just talk to me anytime you've got something. Okay. Let's see. I'm looking. Let's see. Where are we? Here we go. So far, so you'll say anything to feel how you're a one-trick phony. Yes, it works every time. That's right. This is the point, Michael. This is the point. If you deal with particulars, they win, because it's all their game is, though anything you can do, they can do meta. That is, they climb on their high horse and pull out their butts any possible plausible argument why they're heroic. You've got to point that out, or else they'll just keep doing it and you'll keep chasing them around, being led by the nose by them. So don't debate them. They're just masturbating to you taking the bait. Call them on that instead. Calling them a one-trick phony is the heart of it. It really is. It's the heart of it. And it is what it's unfortunate we don't have a better term for this right now. We call it it was called tar babying, which is, if you call them on being one-trick phonies, they'll prove you right. This is an example of a tar baby. Is if you say you're being defensive, there really is no answer to it that doesn't either leave it on the table or affirm it. No, I'm not being defensive. So I try to avoid those in dealing with decent folks. But once I've decided I'm dealing with an absolutist, a one-trick phony, a hero bot, my version of the golden rule is anything you do unto others, expect that they can do it unto you. And so I'm very happy to use tar babying. Now, there are people who object to tar babying, and I just don't want the distraction of using terms that people object to. I don't want to do that. But because I want to get them on the point. But they say that it's racist. I don't think it is. I've done some research into it. In fact, it comes out of African folklore, but in Africa they call it gum babying, so I call it gum babying in my book. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Have I read The Myth of Left and Right? I agree with you. Yeah, good. Now, I don't know that book, and I'll have to take a look for it. It's a shopping cart of policies, not spectrum. Yes, okay. Let's see. There are true believers, but most have a degree of guilt in repeating nonsense they are consuming. There are those who are the spin doctors and those who repeat it. It's a war propaganda technique. This is from Apex Eater. Um, good. Uh, I, I, I want to make some distinctions around this. So, how do we? This is a fundamental challenge we're dealing with. Some of these people are just innocent evil. And I have sympathy for these devils. That is, they're followers. They're gullible. They came from education-deprived societies. They came from a theological perspective, which gives them the ability to feel like they are humbling themselves before the Lord so that they can lord it over others. They don't necessarily know they're doing it. And then there are the leaders of the movement. Now, how do you distinguish? It's very difficult. As a general rule, I think of it as a pyramid scheme. The further up the pyramid scheme you are, the more likely you are to be a leader, not a follower. Let's see. I don't know how much guilt they have in repeating the nonsense they're consuming, though I am trying to provoke that guilt. That's the point of this last video I put out. I'm trying to do that. Now, you say there are true believers. I want to make a distinction between three kinds of believers. I don't like the term true believers as a generalization about all of these people. I think there are true believers and there are false believers of two kinds. There are honest false believers and dishonest false believers. An honest false believer, I got the inspiration for. I was in mainland China doing lecture on the lecture circuit. It was what an opportunity that was. It was fabulous. But uh, I met people who were a member of the Communist Party, and the way they talked about it was just beautiful. They said, "Yeah, of course I'm a communist. You know, I read the literature, I go to the meetings, and all of that. I don't believe it has any bearing on everyday life, but I'm in mainland China. I wear the team jersey. What am I going to do? You know." So that's an honest false believer. A dishonest false believer, MAGA is full of these, are people who wear the team jersey, don't pay attention to they don't care about the beliefs, they care about the status they get from it. Christian nationalists who don't go to church and don't read the Bible and yet claim their authority are dishonest false believers. So I adore honest false believers. I am so grateful to people who can say, yeah, I believe in scientific progress. I believe in church. It's therapy. I need that therapy. We all need that therapy. I need that therapy. I get it in other ways. I play music and pretend that I'm good. I watch movies and pretend I'm the hero. I think we all need that. I think we need to get better at basically respecting the kind of masturbation. It's a kind of masturbation. We need these little pit stops for motivation where we go and feel big about ourselves. And then we need to get back to reality because that's actually where we live. But I do not see humans surviving without those therapeutic outlets for what I call off jerking. I mean, from the outside, you look like a jerk when you're pretending you're something bigger than you are. This is why I think masturbation is such a taboo thing. I don't know if you saw this video I put out. I was wearing clothes, but I pretended I was a Trump supporter jerking off to Trump. Very controversial video for me to put out. I've noticed that YouTube takes way longer to approve my videos than it did before I put this thing out. And yet so I'm happy to shame a Trumpist for jerking off in public, treating government as their vanity project. But if they ever challenge me back and say, "Well, you masturbate too," I'd say, "Damn straight." You know, I don't believe in God, but don't get me wrong. I'm as delusional as the next guy. What do you expect? You know, I happen to be human. So I really think we need a different way to think about masturbation and the varieties of ways we do it. Getting off on our sports team, going to the death metal concerts and feeling like a badass. Buying motorcycles and guitars and all of that stuff, all the weekend warrior stuff. That's the point. That's the only way humans can survive. If you indulge in some of that stuff, bless your heart, you are doing something good for society. Not if you don't remember to zip up after and get back to reality. But otherwise, if you do it in a safe way, safe escapism, optimal illusion, if you do it that way, you are actually benefiting society because people need ways to offer, to vent that appetite to feel exceptional. What? Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see, Tommy, you don't. Let's see, there's something here. Okay, so how do you reply to them attacking the economy, saying things cost less when Trump? Yes, I understand. That is frustrating, Tommy. Uh, uh, Saying things cost less when Trump was president. Um, I had an encounter like this just yesterday. This was on Facebook. Someone was responding to one of my videos, and he talked about he pretended he was all sober and judicious and rational, and he talked about what was wrong with us and how the economy had trashed. I don't believe them, and this is a threatening thing in society. We can talk about all the clueless people in the world, present company accepted. We can gossip all we want about clueless people, but if I ever accuse a friend of being uh, not knowing what motivates them, them's fighting words, and vice versa. I mean, it's a sensitivity we have in direct contact with them. I don't believe these guys. That was kind of the point of this video I put out on Friday. The guy might have, he starts out talking about how he's only in it for policy. That's what you're hearing as the kind of rationalization you get from MAGA these days, is that no, this is all about policy. Bullshit. And so I deal with this on the left and the right. I call it mind reading rights. Um, People will say, don't tell me how I feel. I know how I feel. And they're right. I don't get to tell them how they feel, but I sure as hell get to form my own opinion about how they feel. I don't think they feel that about the environment, about the economy. But if they do, suppose they do, there are two arguments. First of all, if they were paying attention to the general pattern, the right wing or Republican Party, true to its tradition to some extent, but completely contorted these days, tends to strip mine our resources to pander to voters, and they fuck things up royally, the way that Bush did by the end of his term, or the way that Trump did. Then we come in to power and try to clean up their mess. And in the meantime, these whiny voters who think that government is, they're basically voters, it's vanity voting. It's basically consumer voting, like voting is like buying things. And these products they're beneath them because it didn't serve them well enough. I think that's a fundamental form of jerking off. Shopaholics are people who feel like kings because all of these servants are bringing them offerings and they get to dismiss the ones they don't want. So there's a whole lot of that on the left and on the right. I would say vastly more of it on the right these days. Questions of degree matter a whole lot. So that's one piece of it, is that they don't see the basic pattern, which is that Trump kills the goose that lays the golden egg, makes a disaster of things, and then whines and complains about how we screwed up the economy. And the other one is that these guys are pampered. They don't these guys. Your guys who are whining about the economy are people who would not have been able to withstand World War II or any of the other difficulties that any country goes through. And so I actually do ridicule them about what wusses they are. And this is something I'm playing with in general in this last video, but in general. These guys think they're badasses. They are not. They have the lamest verbal combat skills. I mean, it's basically, you're a poopy butt and I know you are, but what am I? I mean, it's kindergarten level stuff, but they feel like badasses. Why? because we don't know how to fight back. So I'm really looking to cut them. I'm really looking to carve them. And I would say that in the 10-year history of Trump's rise, no one has cut him to his face except Kamala Harris in the last debate. I mean, I've just been waiting for anyone to do it. We're all off on the side, cutting them in late night comedy. I love that stuff. Very therapeutic for me to watch that stuff. Um, and in all these earnest videos where we explain how by our moral standards they fall short, but no one cuts them to their face. And that's where I think we need better skills, and it's too late. That is, we should have been on this a while ago. Okay, okay. I've been using your various kind of aggressive fact. Yeah, now fact checks are interesting. I don't think they're playing there. It feels like three-dimensional chess, but it's not. It's all vertical. They're up, you're down. That's all that's going on. They'll mouth their talking points, but I don't mostly want to go there. You know, the videos that show how we whooped their ass in some interaction, no, we didn't. They won because they were playing a different game. The game was whether they could evade and dodge long enough. Um, and so when we fact check them, we feel victorious. We feel triumphant and wise because we were able to outsmart them by our standards. But that's not the game they're playing. So I mostly stay away from fact checking. Um, the other thing is, it's not a competition over who knows more public policy. I have a master's in public policy. I don't think that's the game we're playing here. I mean, I was at a time a policy wonk, and I just don't think that's what we're dealing with them. So while it would be tempting for a guy like me with that background to go in and try and uh, discuss public policy with them, that's a don't. There's no talking with them perspective I take, which is that doesn't work with them. They're not on that. That's not the issue. Even if you do have facts, this is a fundamental question issue in epistemology. The question is, how do you weigh them? So they could say, yes, you might be right, but that's not as important as this other thing that I think is more important. They don't think. I make a point of never using the word think or believe about what they're doing. That is not the level at which this is going on. This is more like bovine braying. This is like territorial pissing. So I'll say they feel, or they seem, or they act like. But belief, I want to reserve that for something that takes more consideration than anything they're doing. That's another example of how I'm working to try and cut the universe at its joints with more precise boundary setting. Belief is this incredibly blunt instrument, broad term. You know, you can say, I believe because I've studied opposing positions on something, or I believe because I don't care and I'll have whatever my local people are having. I don't know. So if that's too broad for me, so I really want to reserve belief. I'm not holding people to my standard for it, but when I think about it, I would not call that belief. When they say, yeah, I'm just having whatever they're having, that comes back down to this question about who's a follower and who's a leader. The followers don't believe by considering various opinions. They are basically regressing to the path of least resistance. And the leaders don't believe for other reasons. They're playing two games at once. They act all earnest like they believe it, but behind the scenes, it's all just one-dimensional chess. I'm up, you're down. Okay. Uh, okay, let's see. I want you to. I notice I'm sparked by something Dennis says here. We have been accurately diagnosing them for 10 years. It's useful, but it's also what I mean by spinning our gears. I think that we just don't have, we're relying on the techniques that have worked in the past. This is a very different kind of demagogue. I call him a demagogue. This is a guy whose status, Trump is a guy whose status is a product of his stupidity and his hypocrisy. When you're rich and powerful, you can afford to be stupid. You can afford to be a hypocrite. So the Trump wannabes there's a sweet spot for them because they're education deprived or whatever, they're impulsive, whatever. They're not very disciplined in the thinking department. They can be really disciplined elsewhere, or they're really disciplined about thinking as an auto mechanic, like my son, but not in their case, they're not disciplined elsewhere. They fuss where they fuss and not here. And so we keep on analyzing them, and it's not making a dent, not a significant enough dent. It may be enough of a dent to get Harris over the line and protect the United States for another little round. It may be enough to get Trump to continue his decomposing Elvis act in the margins. But the base is a major problem. If there's any cosmic wedgie for us to take from this, is apparently the United States is not immune. Humans are humans. This temptation to take the path of least resistance is going to kill us, and it's just way easier. You just go for any argument that flatters you most effectively, that's most affirming, and it's going to make it so people check out of reality. I mean, my doomsday prognosis for humankind, and I'm doing everything I can to forestall it, is a dissociation death spiral. That is, reality will get tougher. People will take the paths of most affirmation, checking out of reality, thereby neglecting reality, thereby making it worse until we just die of a dissociation death spiral. So I'm trying to work on that and trying to figure out what the generic strategy is by which people fall effortlessly into being an asshole if they can get away with it. And how do you keep them from getting away with it? Okay, here, yes, when you're a star, they let you do everything. It's got so much, that line, and that makes me smart, which he said from one of the early debates. Those somehow have been burned in deep. My point, though, is we've diagnosed them all we need to, and that we're still diagnosing and saying, yeah, these guys, blame others, et cetera, is useful to keep in mind. It's true. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Because what we're doing isn't working. Isn't working well enough to forestall this. There are going to be copycats. Vance, just this last week, started to look like what I feared he would be next, which is the next Trump. He's better at it than Trump. Trump is basically a Trojan horse. The fascists don't really respect him. They just see him as their way to gain the entrance. This is what I'm thinking. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. The way I've mostly succeeded was counter grifting, which is to supply new feelings and supply a new story for the feelings, then wait. It takes time. This is from The Machine. I think I know what you're talking about. One of the things, there is this name, Gish Gallop, for what they do, which is they throw lots of stuff at us, and it just becomes a tangle. So you got that in this last vice presidential debate, where Waltz is writing down furiously all the points he wants to make. That's also why I think you have to go meta. You have to say, this guy will say anything to pretend he's always right. And the simplicity of that. Trump is running on nothing but getting away with pretending he's always right. I think that's the heart of it. And this is from a policy wonk. I can do policy. I just don't, because I don't think that's what they're doing here. They're just pretending they're always right. And you have to call them on that and gum baby them with it, because what they'll say is, no, you're basically saying these guys are being defensive. And so I'm saying that's a good thing to do with them. I don't do it with normal people. I don't say it's not all about you. That's another one of those tar baby or gum baby things. No, I wouldn't do that with decent people. But I do think that there's a use in tossing at them over and over. It's not Gish Gallop. I have another name for that. I forget. Avalanche. That is an avalanche of evil at people. But no, you stick with one point and don't get distracted by it. You say, yeah, all these points you're making, all this Gish Gallop you're throwing at me, it's all the same shit. It's you pretending, you jacking off in public to pretending you're right about everything. Get a fucking room. How can you possibly do that with government, you ignoramus? How can you do that? We have the best movies. Porn has never been better. Church services are spectacular. Sports events are incredible. Go fucking do it there. That's where it belongs. We all need it. But you're doing it in the stupidest possible place, the most dangerous possible place. Jerk off elsewhere is you can see I get all fired up. Okay, let's see what we got. This guy seems weird to everyone I know. Is another one of those one that sounds like it shouldn't be effective, but it really works. This one's an interesting one. Friends ask me what they think, what I think about this weirdness leveling. Um, I think you've got to show, not tell. I think that weird was effective for a few days and wouldn't be long term. Remember, one of the problems with a term like weird is, and I would say the same about extremist, is that it's always perspectival. I have to pay attention to when a term is really subjective. So, for example, if I call you a pessimist, what I'm saying is I have higher hopes about the specific thing than you do. It's relative. Okay. So, weird is relative too. We are all very weird by someone's standards, by lots of people's standards. We are all extreme by some standard. So, I didn't expect it to last long or land hard because I actually think that these guys are perfectly capable of saying, I know you are, but what am I? And that's what they've been doing. Um, let's see. Okay. See the Milgram experiment. Yes. And I also want to say this about the Milgram experiment. Um, this is the one in which they found out, this is shortly after World War II, that when an authority speaks to someone, tells someone to do bad things, uh, they defer to the authority. Okay. I want to point out that that is actually something that uh, has its benefits and costs. I'm not the only one to say this, but it has its benefits and costs. One of the benefits is collective action. So, for example, I've worked for a few years with a guy who believes in a foundation. I haven't actually worked with him for a few years. I worked for a few years with him until I was too blunt with him and he dropped me. But he was a guy who believed that we were heading towards one world harmony, um, and that was a good thing. And I was saying, dude, that message is so old. You want to compete with all those people making that message, and it's not working. It's not working. And not only that, if it did work, what would you get is you get a surrendering of autonomy. And we had that already. The Nazis were a one world tribe. That is, everybody did what they were just following orders, all of that. So he was not able to actually look at the mixed bag that surrender is. And I would say in the other direction that the Milgram experiment suggests that it's a problem, and I'm seeing it as a problem and a solution. We need collective action. And we also need to maintain our autonomy. And how you do that balancing act that's the issue. That's what we're dealing with. When do you defer? When do you accommodate? When do you tolerate? When do you not? I just want more people to relax into the discomfort of dealing with those tough judgment calls. That's the curriculum of life. We're all doing with that. Okay. I say okay. In Canada, I've tried inserting. Oh, yeah, there is not a good guy. Okay. Oddly, this is one seems to get some acceptance. Yeah, not a good guy. Uh, yeah, he seems to get some acceptance. I'm not sure if you mean that people accept that he's not a good guy. Yeah, I would say if that's what you mean by it, I agree. Um, Trumpists play punk prude. Um, they alternate freely because their only question is how to be on top. So they can top you by being a petulant brat, and they can top you by being a moral prissy prude. And they don't care because it's only the vertical game of chess they're interested in. They'll do whatever to feel like they're always right. Um, so they are incredibly PC and incredibly anti-PC. And the point is, it's all about pissing on anybody who's not with them. That's all it's about. It's just animal brain. Um, I usually use morals, decency against them as soon as they disrespect me. Then I call out the hypocrisy with the 7 deadly sins, 10 commandments, how Jesus. This is from Michael Bell. Maybe that works with the folks you are talking to. I do not support. I do not believe that's a good strategy. I said it a minute ago. Sorry, I don't think that it's an effective strategy these days. It could be in certain contexts, but I don't believe that it does much more than give us, enables us to take refuge in pious failure. They are proud of their hypocrisy. They are proud of their hypocrisy. Elon Musk gets to be a hypocrite. The tyrants get to be hypocrites. It's actually a badge of power. It's an evidence that you have power, that you can be that impulsive. I had an interesting conversation this morning with someone religious about this in the comment section on that article, on that video that I put out. How Jesus would treat you, the 10 Commandments, the Golden Rules, 7 deadly sins. Notice how ambiguous that is in curbing the kinds of indulgences that we see from MAGA and encouraging them. I think that a fundamental human appetite, best played out in fiction, is to humble oneself before the Lord and then lord it over other people. So I don't end up supporting that. I often will ask a Christian whether Jesus loved everyone, turn the other cheek, or he loved the right people, not the wrong people. And what amazes me about their response is it's like the first time they've ever considered it. I mean, it's the fundamental question. It's be intolerant of intolerance. Okay, so what is Jesus's message about that? I think it's all over the map. And I think that's I think Jesus is all over the map. Notice how easily he plays into the martyr dominance thing. So he's victor, he's the King of Kings, and he's victim. He's the crucified martyr. You get it both ways. You can play poor me, or you can play we're going to win in the end. And I wouldn't say that it starts with Jesus. It starts with the Jews, my folks. These guys who said there's only one God. He likes us best. You can't join us. It was the first killer app. I love Jewish humor. I love Jewish irony. I think the religion's predictable, exactly what humans would have come up with, and pretentious as all get out. But we were some of the first who did that thing where we have just been vanquished, but we will win in the end. It shows up in a prayer. I'm forgetting what the name of it is. Early on, Bob Marley did a version of it, actually. I think that's why we are re-waging all the wars we won. Why we're dealing with monarchy, racism, both versions of segregationism, that separatism, fascism, all of that, because the South will rise again, like Jesus, right? That appetite to believe we were right, we're still right. Just because you defeated us, it's a flesh wound. I recently posted the Monty Python piece where the guy gets cut and cut and cut, and he keeps on saying flesh wound. This is from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Okay, let me see. Let's see. Yeah, so I am arguing that all of these techniques that we have been trying for 10 years, where you get into the weeds with these guys, are not likely to be as effective as pointing out their overall MO, because their overall MO is to top you no matter what you do. And you might come away feeling victorious for having laid out the facts or set them straight on from the moral authority of your religion or whatever like that. And it could work. If you're dealing with someone religious who you might be able to prey on their guilt by quoting, for example, the Bible, where they talk about charlatans like Trump, good for you. And that you got to know your target audience. But in general, that's not the game they're playing. In general, the game they're playing is whatever you say, they'll pull out their ass some reason why you're wrong and they're right, why you're sinful and they're virtuous, because they're just jacking off in public. It's to the territorial grab. It's so much fun. They won't think that's what they're doing. They'll insist that they're paying attention to policy, that they're being rational. No, they're rationalizing. They're rationalizing why they get to be right about everything. That's what I think we're mostly dealing with. Okay, let's see. I'm not keeping up. So again, if you have questions that I didn't get to here, express your frustration in the form of an email to me asking the question. I will get right to it. Let's see. They know they ain't got it bad. If you do it right, they feel sheepish for their whining in public. That's kind of my point. Yeah, that's right. You actually call them out as sissies, wimps, wusses. I I struggled with whether to include pussy in there, um, just as I struggled with this idea that they're homoerotic, which is that they're homoerotic, like fascists, um, uh, about playing hero and hero worship, like the cult of personality stuff. I did venture to call them pussies in there and to call them gay. I have tons of gay friends. I'm going to check with one of them when I can muster the courage. I think they'll be okay with it. I'm talking to I I celebrate gayness, and I am a wimp myself. Everybody has that quality in them, and if you take the Kinsey scale, everybody got some gayness in them. That's not the issue here. But if I could shame them somehow, and it's very hard because they have basically inoculated themselves against ostensible guilt. Whether they feel it or not, they sure don't show it. So how to do that is really a challenge. Let's see, and I am willing to go to the mat with it. I am willing to say things that I wouldn't say with decent folks. Uh, let's see. I'm looking through here. Let's see if anybody posted a question that I really should get to and haven't. Will you repost it if you can? Because there's quite a bit on here, and I'm trying to see the questions. Okay, here's one from Long Defined. Is it more important to have the right people in charge or to throw off concepts of kings? Great question. For early decades in my activism, I was an activist before I was doing this kind of research, and I would say that this is a kind of activism. I would say it's fundamental activism. And I was a climate change activist, and then I came to realize that actually we cannot begin to deal with huge problems like that if we continue to put in charge absolutists. And there will be a tendency to do it because absolutism, the appearance of having a permanent winning streak, is just irresistible to a whole lot of people. But I do think that we don't have to throw out the concept of kings, presidents, bosses, lords, and oligarchs. I think this is a bit of a false choice here. Uh, yeah, we have to have the right people in charge, but in my naive younger days, I used to assume there's a game that some people still play, which is I call it if I were in charge of the world. If good people like me were in charge, we'd have solved all of this right away. I don't play that game anymore. I'm interested in what's the most we can do with what we're dealt. But I also have friends and associates and lived on a commune that was flat hierarchically that attempted to say no kings, presidents, bosses, lords, and oligarchs. And I don't think it works for the Milgram reason. That is, it's we overlook this about the if you give a man a fish thing. If you give a man a fish, he'll be fed for a day. If you teach a man to fish, it's going to take longer, a whole lot longer. And not only that, it's iffy. So we do end up, delegation is expensive and difficult and meandering. It's difficult. So, and yet we have no alternative to that because collective action doesn't really work. Libertarians talk as though it could, but libertarians are really just getting high on how they deserve more freedom, more liberty. That is the ones I've encountered, and I've been on forums with them. That is, I've been in debates on videos with them. No, that's all I hear from them. That the world would go around a whole lot better if people like me were given more freedom. It's this thing about exclusive freedom, which the Trumpists demand, versus inclusive freedom, which Kamala is promoting. But we have to recognize that inclusive freedom is where we have the challenges we do, why we are so, in effect, impotent against the exclusive freedom people. Exclusive freedom movements, we are the only ones who deserve freedom. Those are self-funding movements, and they are unconstrained. They're not busy thinking about anybody else's freedom. We are stuck with this challenge of what to tolerate, given that we should be intolerant of intolerance. So I think we've lost whole years in the battle against the Trump fascists by getting squeamish about demanding that they shut the fuck up in the public square, because we don't like saying that. We feel uncomfortable depriving anyone of their freedom. Yeah, but I think we have to deprive people who demand exclusive freedom of their freedom to demand exclusive freedom. That's so. Anyway, I don't know if I answered that. Here we go. Let's see where we go. We're winding down here. How to address someone being hateful of groups of people, but they talk about Trump is smart? How Trump is smart instead. In a way, that's all I've been talking about here. And I don't believe, let's see, being hateful. Uh, yeah, in a way, that's mostly what I have been arguing for in general. So, Tommy, take a look at some of the videos. What I say is you change the subject. You impose some frame dominance. Um, you frame some where you get to set the agenda. They don't, and you laugh at them. And you laugh at them for how pathetic their jerking off is to how smart Trump is, and how dumb they look from the outside. And you do it as a way of sharing your opinion, as if you get to have one. They have basically, early on in the movement, they decided that anybody who disagrees with them is worthless to listen to. So how you trap them in a situation where, yes, fine, dude, you got your opinion and here's mine. How you do that is a really interesting challenge. I think you've got to do it by locking them early on the assumption that if they walk out of the conversation, they're wusses, that they couldn't handle it. They will play that thing, so I'm willing to use it on them, and I have to do it in advance of them. I have to do it before they do it on me. And then you just lay out your opinion. You're not trying to change your mind. That's enabling. Don't try to change their mind. You simply voice your opinion with the confidence that it deserves, the confidence that you should own, the confidence that matches theirs, and you can leave it at that. I do not want to be seen as leaning over backwards and forwards in every which way to try to get them to change their mind. They don't deserve that, but they do deserve to hear what you think of it, and you make fun of it. You ridicule them for how ridiculous they look, um, jerking off in public to how smart Trump is. If imagine this. Um, I wrote this up elsewhere this week. There's an old joke. What did the Deadheads say when the LSD wore off? This music sucks, they said. That's a joke. Now, I have experienced in recent years tensions with friends to where I realized that the thing I needed to do was to forget everything I knew about them and to hear them afresh for the first time, because they've changed gradually over the years and I hadn't noticed. Very effective thing to do. I'm assuming that if I taunt and tease, if enough of us taunt and tease these guys, there might come a time when they listen to Trump like the Deadhead when the LSD is worn off. This music sucks. This music sucks because it really does, and it's kind of amazing how they're still listening to it. I have a general assumption that anybody who listens to a dumb, broken record over and over is actually not listening to it, they're jerking off to it. So anybody who watches Fox News every night or listens to Trump repeatedly or Tucker Carlson, they're jerking off. There's no new content there. Okay. So let's see. All right, sorry. And we're about to wind down. Uh, let me know this. I've been doing this every other week. I don't want to wear out my welcome. I'm happy to do it weekly if that's of value. I'm also happy to do it in a circle on YouTube or not on YouTube, on Zoom or something else. I use Google Meet, where we can actually all talk, because I don't feel that comfortable talking this long at people. But email me if you'd be interested in a study group that does that, and also let me know somewhere, somehow, including right here, if you think this is best done once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks, and also what days are best for you, because I'm just guessing and floating around. And like I said earlier, I do this 7 days a week. I could do it any day, any evening, anything like that. And also, I want to remind you, if you're dealing with a particular jerk in your life or difficult situation where the power imbalance has gotten to be a problem, that's the consulting work I do. We analyze your particular situation. We look at where to assert, accommodate, leave, all of those things. I'm amazed. I have been 10 years retired from sex, love, uh, uh, romance, dating, marriage, all of that stuff. I'm 68, and this stuff is frankly more interesting to me, and I need the freedom to think it. And it was hard in partnership. And yet, a lot of my clients these days are married men and women who are dealing with a power imbalance in their relationship, and they are finding what I have to say useful. I am not advocating one way or the other about the relationship. It's all about getting them what they want. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, um, it's a sliding scale price. I have to make some money, but it's sliding scale-ish, and it's short term. It's not like this is, as I started out here, it's not psychotherapy where we go deep into your childhood and do all that exploration stuff. We can do some of that if you want. I'm not a clinical psychologist. And it's not personal coaching, which is basically a mixture of strategy and pep talk. It's strategic consulting. It's figuring out what you should try next, given your abilities, given your situation, all of that. It's basically dealing with this question of it's the wisdom to know the differences that make a difference. Okay. uh uh yes, this hate is dangerous. We know that, and thank you, Los Skills, for putting my email address there. Email me any old time in the middle of the night if you want. Say, Jeremy, I got this problem, or this, Jeremy, I got this problem with what you said. Thank you. If you do that, that's great. I love that kind of critique. But also, Jeremy, I'm dealing with this problem. What would you suggest? I somehow seem to have infinite patience for that kind of work/play. All right, you guys, I'm gonna head out. Um, uh, I've got a marriage client in a minute, and it is a pleasure to wonder with you. And I would love to wonder in more dialogue. So your wonderings are my wonderings. My wonderings are your wonderings. We can play together. Let's do that. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's fun. Take care. I'll talk to you guys later. All right.